Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Progressive Bitcoiner. I'm your host, Trey Walsh, and today we have on the show Becca Bratcher, who wrote 21 Women in Bitcoin, which is out now. At the time of this recording, it was before the release, but now that the pod is out, her book is out now, talking about women in Bitcoin and their contributions and how Bitcoin is for everyone. It's not just this crypto bro thing that even I thought before getting into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is for everyone, including women, women around the world, women in the US. And we get into all of that in this episode. Becca talks about her own experience getting into Bitcoin and learning about Bitcoin, talking to normies and friends and family about Bitcoin in her life and how she approaches that, the benefits of Bitcoin for women in the US, for women globally. And it was just a really good conversation. And I want to thank Becca for coming on the show, for contributing, for going to that first Bitcoin conference a while ago that she mentioned, and just going forward ever since then, and for writing this book. So please go out and get the book. You can order on Amazon, the audiobook, or the physical copy. You can find that in our show notes to support Becca, support women in Bitcoin. And please share with family and friends that have conceptions about Bitcoin, especially that Bitcoin is only for certain types of people or only for folks like, FTX and SBF and crypto bros and all of this different nonsense, when Bitcoin is for everyone. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you've heard of examples that Bitcoin is for anyone who needs it, who wants to use it. Bitcoin is really for everyone. So go out, support Becca, get in touch with her as well. If you're kind of a woman in the space looking to know how to contribute more and just want someone to be able to talk to and learn from, Becca is a great resource, and I know would love to hear from you all. And before we get to the conversation, as always, I will mention our awesome partners. There's Saz Mining to get $50 off each and every miner you purchase through Saz Mining using 100% renewable energy. And it is the best way to stack sats is mining. Why not try mining today? Check out Saz Mining's promo link in our show notes. And then also Bitbox is our sponsor for today's episode. I've been using the Bitbox hardware wallet for quite a while now, and it is the best Bitcoin hardware wallet on the market. You're going to get 5% off Bitbox products. You can go to bitbox.swiss/TPB and use TPB at checkout to get 5% off. All right, I'll let you get to the awesome conversation I had with Becca now, and we'll see you again next week. Hi, Becca. Welcome to the Progressive Bitcoiner. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Excited to jump into 21 Women in Bitcoin and talking about a really important topic that I like to focus on a lot, which is just trying to talk about Bitcoin and appeal to people throughout the normal world, as we call it, normies, pre-coiners, whatever, about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is for everyone, Bitcoin is for anyone, whatever word you want to use to describe how it's for all varieties of people. And, before we jump in too much, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and say a little bit about more of what you like to focus on and kind of why we're here to talk today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Becca, and I originally heard about Bitcoin back in 2014, probably. And like many people completely dismissed it, thought it was such a scam, really didn't pay attention to it at all until my husband started working on his dissertation in blockchain-based land registry rights for those who don't have as secure property ownership. And so that kind of piqued my interest. Again, I didn't dive down the Bitcoin rabbit hole until COVID hit and was stuck at home and started reading and really kind of fell down that rabbit hole during that time. Like I think a lot of people did. It's a very common thing. And so from there, my original background is in healthcare. I worked as a nurse for a while. And then we had some kids, stayed home for a little bit. And during COVID, it was almost like an urgency of like, this is so much more than just a currency that's digital. And so a friend and I, Amy, started a podcast, just kind of recapping whatever happened that week in crypto and Bitcoin. And it was around 2022. So there is no shortage of topics to talk about. That's when everything kind of hit the fan, So I learned, again, just so much about different aspects of the space, how it worked differently globally. My experience in the US is very different from just anywhere else in the world. And so uh, learned a ton. And from there, Amy and I always wrote our own content. And so it was a lot of writing. Um, and then a friend of mine was like, hey, I know that you feel like, just like very, very passionate about raising your daughters to be, financially independent and teaching them about how to manage their resources. So what if you wrote a book about women in Bitcoin? You could call it 21 Women in Bitcoin. And he gave me a couple of suggestions about like different people to include. And that was Billy Gannon. So you'll see in the book, he's one of the people that it's dedicated to just because it was his idea. And he was very kind to give it to me. So from writing in the podcast, I transitioned to writing, just interviewing women about their experience in Bitcoin, how they got into it, what they do, and if they think it's important to close the gender gap, and if there is a gender gap, and kind of what that means from different perspectives. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me and how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, kudos. I know, I've even toyed with, I write articles here and there. I've toyed with writing a book. There's so many great books in this space. Not like I got in 2021 and there weren't too many. There were some, and now there's so many different books focusing on Bitcoin and the rabbit hole after that from so many different people from global perspectives, like all over the world now, which is really awesome. So I think it's really great that you took that under, and I'm glad you did. That's really, really exciting, and must feel good to also just create something and write it and have it out into the world.
Yes, it's a little nerve wracking too. Just like, okay, because the book focuses on obviously the women who have contributed, but also it's explaining 21 different aspects of Bitcoin. So trying to write about that, I mean, you have to like really dive in deep and like think about where do I start? How do I write about this? Makes you really study it at a different level.
Yeah, and when you were writing the book, who are you writing for or to? What would be your target audience? Some people could argue everyone who needs to understand this other perspectives of Bitcoin, besides what I was talking to you about, the crypto bro notion of Bitcoin, or what a lot of people think about Bitcoin and crypto before getting into it. But what was your target audience, or who did you have in mind when writing the book?
Honestly, it was it's hard to know. Like initially, I just wanted to know what it was like in like African countries, kind of like what it was like their experience, because it's so different um, than here in the U.S. So like Marita, Naparima, or Marcel, Lorraine, like hearing their experience really just triggered kind of like I don't know, just a different train of thought of like how Bitcoin really can be used as a currency and how important it is for women specifically, because um, it's so different if you don't have access to a bank account, or if you can't control your money. I mean, there's just so many things that you can't do. Um, and so I think that's kind of initially like when I started learning about their experience, I just wanted to educate women everywhere, especially because like I feel like if you educate women in the US and they kind of can help spread the word, it really does help globally, like just expand what Bitcoin can do. You know what I mean? Like there's a ton of women who are doing amazing things across the globe, but in my little circle, I really wanted people that I interacted with to understand how powerful Bitcoin really can be. It's not about number go up, although that is a part of it. It's definitely not what I find so fascinating about it.
Yeah, that's so true, and I often talk about it. It's kind of the unfortunate or fortunate reality of being in the US, especially when we talk about money and finance and understanding the US dollar is the global reserve asset, what the US does in a lot of ways around policy or anything with money and markets and technology. A lot of the world follows. Governments model things after the US for better and for worse. Authoritarians use US technology, all of these things. So I think um, that raises a good point of having folks in the US exposed to stories beyond our borders about Bitcoin can do really good things, because unfortunately our impact is pretty sizable in the world right now, especially being in the US, and the privilege that carries um, in terms of something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin policy or just Bitcoin adoption, and what outsized influence we can have in terms of our percentage of the global population. is pretty massive. So I think that's a really good point. Just educating women in the US and what domino effect that can have. Like you're one individual, right, that learned about Bitcoin, and then the impacts you're having either running a podcast, going on podcasts, writing books, meeting women and talking to women, that kind of is the domino effect beyond that. That would be really cool to see continue to replicate across the country.
Yeah, I'll never forget like the first Bitcoin conference I went to was a really small one. It was great, like definitely piqued my interest more on like the history of money. But then everyone there was talking about Bitcoin Magazine's Miami conference, and I thought
Mhm.
conference meant like your the conference that you think of when you think of a work conference. So I
Yeah.
show up, I have like business attire on, and I'm just like, what is
Oh,
going
yeah.
on? This is so strange. I do not know where I am or like what this is about. Um, and all of the women in the line for the bathroom were joking because it was just like so short. Like, and then you look over at the line for the men's restroom and it was like wrapped around the building. I mean, you're just like, this just is so wild. Like, there's such a camaraderie for women in Bitcoin. I mean, and it's
Mhm.
I'm very happy to see how much it's evening out. And there are tons of women now. And even in the book, I mean, it was impossible to ask just the 21 women. Like, there's so many that you could have easily contributed. There's so many women in the space that I respect. But yeah, it's just like a different type of, yeah, camaraderie is really the only word I can think of, because it's just like, hey, like, how did you end up here? Like, what's your
Mhm.
story? Um, yeah, so it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can understand. That's really funny because thinking about the lines at the bathroom in general, like you go to a concert or something, it's the complete opposite. So you already know on the surface something's different here. That this is the men's room is really really long, and this that's really funny. Just a little side anecdote. I want to ask you a couple of questions that I hear in the let's say I hear online, because there's the difference as you're even discussing of online. What stuff is a lot of people learn about Bitcoin initially maybe online because it's the easiest way to access it, right? Not everyone is just day one hears about Bitcoin, day two they're at a conference or they're at a meetup. Sometimes those things take a little bit longer. A lot of times people lurk or just listen, learn online, podcasts, things like that for a little bit before they want to go in person, before they want to write, before they want to do all these other things. So online, I've seen many different things. I've even heard it out loud, really. One of them is that women naturally would not be interested in Bitcoin or in crypto or in anything relating to finance. And I'm saying that because I've heard it quite a bit, not because I would believe that whatsoever, because I don't. But what would you say in terms of comments like that? That, well, the inequality or inequity just in numbers in terms of Bitcoin and conferences, like you mentioned, is because women just aren't interested in that kind of statement. What would you respond to someone like that, or even some women that might perceive Bitcoin as that?
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception, because Bitcoin is, women, especially in the US, control the vast majority of purchasing decisions for households and communities.
Yeah.
So to say that women are not interested in finance is completely false. I think there's been a history globally, but I am more familiar with it here in the US, is women were not allowed in financial spheres until somewhat recently. Um, and especially even just like you can see the shift in education over the last 50, 60 years. Women are now the majority of um, university enrolled students. So I think it's
Mm.
shifting. I think it's more of a historical, like, you know, just I don't prejudice is not the right word at all, because I think it's just how it happened. Like, that's just women were not, didn't have as many freedoms as men historically. So I think Bitcoin, because it has in a lot of ways branded itself as crypto bro culture, especially like FTX really didn't help that at all. And
Oh yeah.
so I think we're just coming out of it though, because more women are being more vocal about their interest in Bitcoin, what it can do. Kathy Wood is one of the just I just have so much respect for her and what she does. Not only is she brilliant, but she's eloquent, she's professional, and she's gained the respect of the industry. And I feel like even tons of people outside of the industry. People like her are just really making it accessible for women to feel like, oh, okay, yeah, no, women are respected here. This is more than just like, frat party. Like it's really changing the world. And I think, it is unfortunate that we don't have to like dive into politics here at all, but just the fact that conservative parties are just, I think, originally more like open to Bitcoin. It comes more naturally. And I think for women that's, not across the board that's the case, but I think it is a little bit more like, okay, what is this? Why am I hearing like two different sides of the story here? So my hope is that women will see that they just need to dive in and learn more about it and see that it really is a welcoming space. And it can be a tool for financial freedom for a lot of women. And I think for my daughters, especially, it's still very unknown at the moment, but like for my generation, and for their generation, Bitcoin will be like just common knowledge, I feel like.
Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitbox. Now, Bitbox is a hardware wallet that's open source, incredibly secure and easy to use, and it's what I'm using to safely secure my Bitcoin in cold storage. Now, I know self-custodying Bitcoin can really be intimidating, but Bitbox is designed for ease of use without compromising on security. It's USB-C compatible and allows you to easily back up and restore your private keys with a micro SD card, which is really cool. Now, you can purchase the Bitbox using the promo code TPB at the link found in the show notes for 5% off your purchase. And I really want to thank Bitbox for their support of the podcast. All right, I'll let you get back to the episode now. Yeah, I think there's so many cool examples of folks in this space. And I think to add on like the welcoming aspect, like yourself being one example, others like Lisa and Ella Huff, like I could think of different people that embody a lot of what you're talking about, like kick-ass women in the space, also being super kind and welcoming and professional and eloquent, um, uh, more so than so many other people, so many other men in the space. All of these things, right? Just being kind of powerhouses of influence in general with Bitcoin. And that's so cool. You bring up your kids too, because there's another family element with so many people that are in the Bitcoin space. And I'm even thinking about with myself because I do have a daughter on the way that I've started telling
Congratulations.
people. Thank you. Yeah. So later on this year, end of November, and just thinking about like I talked to my wife nonstop about Bitcoin, just thinking of like, my daughter and raising kids in this environment and that notion of financial freedom and empowerment, and to be able to raise a girl with that, I'm like really excited for that. Like really just giddy thinking about that and hearing from just other folks that have been parents in the space and that kind of embodiment. Because a lot of it, you're right, a lot of it is historical. A lot of it is just unnecessary gatekeeping, all of these different things that Bitcoin really breaks that apart. And there's no barrier to entry. There might be a cultural, societal impression that people keep themselves from entering, right? Or very understandably, they might see something and be like, that's why politics can be really disruptive a little bit, right? Because someone sees someone they don't like talking a lot about Bitcoin. And then you have to say, just learn for yourself. That person doesn't control Bitcoin, or that company doesn't control
Right.
Bitcoin, or FTX doesn't actually control Bitcoin. This is what happened here. It takes a little bit more explanation, but I think people are getting it more and more now. Definitely more so than when I got in just 3 years ago. So that's really exciting. Very, very bullish on the diversity of Bitcoiners coming in at this time, the younger generation of Bitcoiners coming in that don't care about all of these trivial things or tribal things. They're just like, yeah, we've seen how the world's broken. We're ready. We're ready to jump in and contribute.
Right. Yeah. I think as much as it doesn't make sense to boomers, it's the complete opposite to the alpha generation coming up. Like they totally get it.
Yeah, it's natural. It's a technological revolution, and I do think a lot of folks talk about how it's generational divides even more than political. I do think there unfortunately is a little bit of political divide still, just in rhetoric and politicking and things like that, not inherently in what it is, but generationally, that's where you see people really grasping on it. A lot of the younger generation, at least they might be neutral on it. They might just not know a lot about it. There's not as much animosity compared to like an Elizabeth Warren or someone like that, where animosity is through the roof. And people then start saying, why are you so angry about this? What's going on? So it's important to tell stories like 21 women in Bitcoin. So I want to segue into that a little bit. Can you share with people just a little bit of a teaser on kind of what to expect in the book? You talked about some of the global stories. Is there maybe kind of one story or one example from the book that you'd like to share with people? Maybe one that was really influential in your life as well. And I'm sure you can say all of them, understandably. But what's a one or two that you could share with the audience?
Yes. Each story that I you know got to write and talk with the women on the other end, I was blown away because each woman is so different, a wide variety of ages and backgrounds, and it was just so much fun to write. But I would say one of the ones that really stands out to me is Alana Mediavilla, and she is the woman behind the documentary called Dirty Coin. And I know they're going to have a showing in Nashville, so if you're at the conference, you should definitely go and check it out. But not only is she a business owner, she's a mom, she's a wife. She is just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and just warm and welcoming, but also very professional, works hard, and creates a good product. And so I think just hearing her story about, getting started, getting funding, all the backlash that she got for making the film. And I mean, it's been a couple of years in the making. And so how the landscape has changed in that time, I think now we look at it and we're like, oh yeah, like this is perfect timing. It's about Bitcoin mining and how it can be good for the environment versus, devastating and causing global warming and all the headlines that you'll see out there. And I just really admire her for sticking it out, because it has not been easy, I'm sure. I know I only know a fraction of what she's had to put up with. And so I think hearing just how she persevered, is just absolutely crushing it right now with her showings and getting her product out there. It's just been really, really cool to see. And I've seen a short bit of it, but I'm really excited to see the whole thing in Nashville in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I think, but I mean, again, really any story, it just blows you away.
Yeah, and that's the tip of the iceberg. And I will say with Alana, there's some like I gotta say here and there, oh, doing the podcast can be hard, or you hear this and you hear that, and you got to persevere. Gosh, Alana, talk about perseverance. I mean, not only finding folks to kind of fund those efforts and dealing with that, dealing with who's going to believe in this little dirty coin Bitcoin mining doc. That's really specific. And also, I don't know if we want to touch anything in the crypto world after FTX, all of that stuff. And I had her on this show a few months ago. It was one of my favorite conversations that I've had on this show because you're exactly right. That kind of like model person in the space that they're creating really good stuff, like just on like fantastic. You can send it to normies, like Stranded, the little short doc that's kind of the precursor to this. Show that. I mean that and maybe a couple other things in the space, like throwing a little Alex Gladstein clip, Anita Posh. That's all you need within 30 minutes to show someone why, as resistance money folks have been saying, why it's better to live in a world with Bitcoin than without. Like, so her film, I'm very, as we say, bullish on all of that. And she has kept going when a lot of people probably wouldn't have. So shout out to Alana, especially, and for folks, she's been doing screenings all over the country, all over the world. So hopefully, for folks even that can't go to Nashville, I think she has plans at some point for it to be available to stream somewhere or in more local theaters and beyond. So hopefully, more people will get to watch that. But that's a great example of someone just killing it.
No, I really hope that it ends up on a streaming platform because I would love to show it to my normie friends, as they say. Yeah, I just think it would be really amazing. So cheering for her, and want to support her however I can.
Yeah, for sure. If there are other women listening to the show, or other folks in general that are looking into Bitcoin and they have preconceived notions, or they've been one of the things we try to tackle, right? At least from kind of the progressives and the left. Hey, we know you've heard a lot from Greenpeace. We know you've heard a lot from Elizabeth Warren. We know, like, just explore Bitcoin a little bit more and see that there's more there. What advice do you have to women looking into the space and feeling like it's not really my thing or it's not for me? Like, what are some of the things that that kind of helped you early on just explore and become captivated by Bitcoin?
Yeah, I really did write it off for a long time. I just wasn't interested, and I clearly didn't understand it. But I think as a woman looking into this space, so my husband works in the space, and if it hadn't have been for him, I don't think I would have ever gone to my first Bitcoin conference. I actually just went with him to meet up with a friend who was in the same city, and caught one session, and I was intrigued. So that's kind of how that all, like, how my interest anyway continue to grow. So it is very intimidating to walk into a room of people at a networking event and just be like, listen, I don't work in space. I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything, because, Bitcoin draws on, like any other industry, a unique set of people, and you really don't know who you're going to meet. So I wouldn't recommend going to just any meetup either. And I would suggest bringing a friend. So it's just nice to, walk in and know that you are going to go, and you're going to have to kind of, just use your own judgment, weed through the crowd, and kind of see, like, who is going to be helpful. And anyway, I'm like going off here. You can cut that out, actually, if you want to.
No, I thought that was really
like,
good.
that's probably too honest. Like, there's a lot of weird people here, but fine. Okay.
No, that's honest. And like, yeah, in Bitcoin and crypto, but also like a lot of different conferences, right? You have like I mentioned, a lot of this starts like online and on the internet. So yeah, you're gonna be able to find your people as well. But that's a good point. Let's be honest as well. What are some of the things that were challenges for you that because everyone has challenges. I think for me it was a challenge being historically from the left and a progressive, and I grew in some ways learning to Bitcoiners I disagreed with, but also in other ways I had to push through some things that I do think are more toxic of individuals, of online culture, of trying to do what I do because I think it's really important, not just because I'm a progressive or left leaning person, but because I think other people could learn from different things that I might think or feel compared to like someone else who's on the right in Bitcoin. So there's things I had to push through and say, okay, let me just try to ignore that. Let me focus on this. What are some things that were challenging for you that you're comfortable sharing? It's not about like this person or that, but what are some things that you had to kind of push through to keep going? Because I think that's a real thing that other folks might appreciate hearing and say, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's just an intimidating crowd to walk into. It's, I feel like originally I just would try to just say the bare minimum and then kind of gauge what the other person knew. So I would, ask them, are you into Bitcoin or crypto? Like the most basic question you could ask. And then just kind of let them talk and kind of figure out, okay, like, where should the conversation go? Because I didn't want to look stupid. I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was talking about. And I did a ton of reading on the back end of that because I just wanted to understand. I knew there was a ton of fraudulent rug pulls out there. And even in the Bitcoin space, you're going to run into that. You're going to encounter that because it's just people trying to grasp onto a movement that is catching a lot of ground right now. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just challenging. I can't recommend enough going with a friend, going with somebody that you trust. Natalie Brunel talks about this all the time. She brought her friend Paula with her to the first Bitcoin conference. I was with my husband at the first Bitcoin conference I went to, and it's just really nice to have someone there with you that you trust, that you don't feel as intimidated. But I mean, it's just people are going to make comments. They're going to make you feel stupid. Just don't let it bother you too much. Just kind of let it right off your back because it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And Bitcoin is a new industry. So nobody is an expert, really. I mean, there are like people who know more and people who know less, but anyone can study it and have your own opinion about it. You can use it for what you want to use it for. And I think that's the beauty of it, is you really can create it to be what you want it to be. And yeah, just really don't let it get to you, whatever somebody's going to say. So
yeah, beware of the gatekeepers. If folks are saying they are an authority on XYZ, Bitcoin is a community of anti-authoritarians. I think I've gotten, excuse me, more comfortable saying that one of the commonalities is we're not a trusting environment for good reason, because we don't trust the banks, we don't trust these institutes. A lot of folks have been burned. We don't trust these companies, FTX. So that maybe that's a common thread, when you can be whoever you are entering into Bitcoin. But
And along with that, I would say when I first started getting into the space, I would say I was more of a progressive, for sure. And now I would say I'm more independent, because I have learned more about, just the history of money, kind of what that entails, how it is very controlling, how the government does manipulate people, and then just how the political landscape is shaped. It's in modern day, it is so broken, and it is all about money, control, and power. And I think any type of like goodwill or caring about people, your constituents, is pretty much out the window. It's all about the headline grabs. It's all about who's polling the best. And it's really sad, because I think that lobbying is what runs the nation, and it's so backwards, it's so broken. And I'm not a single issue voter, but I just think that it's just really unfortunate the way that, at least in the US, how politics has just turned out to be, because it's very frustrating. I know we could probably talk about this in circles for a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I too, and I've said it on many episodes even recently, that I'm not a single issue voter. There's a lot of other things I care about. I do think politics and voting and local and federal, all this stuff matters. But at the same time, you can look at the decades past. Political parties have come and gone. Some things have just continued to kind of get worse, like living standards, livability, paycheck to paycheck workers, all of these things that revolve around money, revolve around your ability to get ahead. It was easier for our parents and grandparents to afford things than it is us and our kids. Those kind of things. And so I completely understand. I kind of became an independent even right before getting into Bitcoin. So I think it was easier for me to understand Bitcoin, because I was already very jaded with the political process. And I definitely still lean left and progressive on a lot of value oriented things. But I see in a lot of ways, like, and these politicians, their incentives are not aligned with what they should be. They're concerned more about being career politicians than civil servants. The way that it originally was kind of set up, it wasn't supposed to be this glorious, you stay in there until retirement job. It was kind of like I'm going to go be a rep for 4 years, and then I'm going to go back and work in my law office or go back to farming, whatever the case may be, and understand things have evolved, right? But there's a lot of things broken. So I think coming into Bitcoin, it's easier for someone to understand Bitcoin if they already see that the current system and way of life is broken. And a lot of people don't quite see that, but they feel the anger, they feel the emotion, they feel populist movements that made folks like Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump popular in the first place, like different movements of populism around the world. They feel that. So I really feel like folks are right, better than ever, ripe for understanding Bitcoin in this country. And then you mentioned Farida and Marcel, other folks. When I had Farida on the show almost a year ago, I think at this point, one thing she said to me that was really interesting was her father and grandfather, they were historic activists. They understood Bitcoin within like 5 seconds. Maybe not the tech, maybe not, but they understood, oh, money's separate from the state. Oh, yeah, that sounds great. Like, they were ripe for understanding Bitcoin because they had been through a super broken system. The US were very privileged. So we might be some of the last people, citizens, to understand Bitcoin, but because we don't need it as much. But some people might, especially I've heard many cases for women in unequal relationships or marriage, where you're talking about who owns property, who owns money, who owns all of these things. Some people might be in very good positions to understand Bitcoin. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Alex Gladstein's book, Check Your Financial Privilege, just one of my all-time favorite Bitcoin books because of how he explains that. And especially the story of Roya Mahbub and how she just is such a badass. I'm like, man, she is brilliant and works is creating a better life for so many women who otherwise didn't have control over their lives. I mean, And that's just something that I don't have to think about. And I'm grateful for that, but it doesn't mean that I can't get the word out for other women who may not be in that same spot. And I do feel very strongly about that. Yeah, it's just incredibly empowering to understand something that you have full control over. And I think, well, I mean, to what you just said, if we don't have to deal with that on a daily basis, we're not going to look for an alternative. And so I think that's why it's so hard for a lot of people to even, put the time in to understand what Bitcoin is. They're just going to write it off until they have to know what it is. And it is, with all the inflation right now, it has made that conversation transition a little easier, to just even like my peer group. We're all talking about budgeting and how much groceries cost. And, it's getting harder and harder to, plan a trip or do stuff that otherwise you could have done before. But now with the inflation crazy as it is, like everyone's tight, everyone's trying to figure out what to do. It's impacting, people going back to work or different schools or moving, all these different things. And it's not something that you can just ignore anymore. And so Bitcoin becomes an easier thing to explain and talk about. And really the fact that it's important to understand the history of money and how you really can vote with your Bitcoin now, because you have other options. You can opt out.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And you kind of led right into my next segue that I wanted to ask about, because we talk a lot on this show about human rights, global stuff, Bitcoin tech, all of that stuff. And we'll continue to do that, and that's good. But every now and again, for our US audience, in this case, maybe women in the US, those kind of folks that don't need it as much, right? What are some of the ways that Bitcoin has benefited you, like in your family, that you'd be open to sharing, and that you could share to other people, like the use cases, even for folks in the US who might have, we have Venmo, they have their matched retirement accounts, maybe they're doing okay, things are getting tighter or whatever. What are some of the use cases that for privileged Americans or American women, things that you've benefited from with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think I am naturally not a very trusting person. And so when my husband started talking about Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn what it is. I want to have my own wallet. I want to have my own cold storage. I want to do it all myself because I want to know what it is and I want to be able to explain it to somebody else.
Mm.
And so I think,
Well, hold on, real quick, if you don't mind. So when he was saying Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, were you like, I don't know, this sounds like, I don't know if I want to just like gamble, like sports betting, like what's going on here?
sure.
Like what was that? What was that conversation like initially?
Yeah, no. So initially we both heard about it pretty early on. And he was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I think he understood it better than I did at first, for sure. But we both kind of ignored it until he was working on his dissertation, 2014. He got more into it. And then he started the Texas Blockchain Council in 2019. And so that's when we started going to more stuff. And I was like, I don't want to show up looking like I don't know what's going on, because this does seem very sketch. And I don't want to be part of something that's like, going to be a rug pull or make me look like a fool. And, what is this going to mean for our family? And so that's when I really started diving into, I want to be able to transact. I want to be able to figure out what it is and explain it. So
you started learning about it. You started jumping in. What were some of the things once it started clicking for you? What were some of the things that made it click more for you?
I think my first thought, honestly, was because of his dissertation and having that perspective on it first, instead of just like, oh, this is like a, gambling situation, like for a lot of people with like Dogecoin and all, whatever. I think I really thought of people who are underbanked, just how transformative this technology is, that they don't have to, go into a bank and have an incredible loan that's going to totally rule their life. Like they can open a Bitcoin wallet and they can transact, and they literally can have everything that they need at their fingertips. And it's not ideal at the moment because it is volatile. It is hard, not everyone accepts it, but like, I just love the fact that there's another option. And I hope one day I can get more of the word out. You start a company or something like that solely focuses on those who are underbanked being educated in Bitcoin and what it can do. And there's all kinds of different projects out there. Mindy Miner is one who's working to start an education system along with a Bitcoin vegan. I can't remember the his first name. He just goes by vegan. In the prison system. Justin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To educate people who are getting out of the prison system to be educated in Bitcoin and get a job in the Bitcoin space. And it's just wonderful on so many levels, because not only is it providing a job, which is one of the hardest things to get if you are coming out of the prison system, but you can save money, you can earn money. Like, it's just all of the things that our financial system limits people on, Bitcoin can provide. And so I just think it's an amazing thing that has so many avenues of untapped potential that we haven't even started yet.
Yeah, I'm really interested in your company idea. I think that's needed. Now, is your interest in, obviously you mentioned global stuff, or are you thinking globally, or you're thinking US? Because I think that's another misconception. There's quite a large unbanked, you kind of alluded to it as well, even kind of prisoners, a different issue. Our credit system, our Corey system is very predatory, is very backwards. I like that you said there's another option. I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think folks over time will see there's better options. Like, hell, even the loan providers are getting better. Like, instead of, having to give up your credit score and all, like, every single document you've ever owned about yourself to a bank and figure out and have your phone and email spammed forever, there's companies that you can get a loan if you have Bitcoin, and it can happen in like a day, right? There's some KYC, yes, all of that stuff. So it's already an improvement, right? And we're only 15 years in, I mean, we're what, 5 years into more institutional Bitcoin. We're so early. I mean, 10 years from now, gosh, like, banks are going to have to find other solutions because people are just not going to use them. So it helps make things more competitive. I think banks will continue to adapt to this world, or they'll die, one or the other, because they'll see it's a better option, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I am hopeful that the U.S. can get it together enough to pass some banking legislation that can kind of, push that forward, because it is, I mean, and yeah, it's just a mess and it needs to happen. And it's really sad that it hasn't happened yet, because it's all about keeping that power and control in place. I really don't think that there's any other reason why that not passing it. So yeah, no, I think ideally, I mean, it's for people that we know who are mowing lawns and don't have a Venmo and need a quick way to transact, because you can't rely on cash sometimes, or it gets stolen. All the reasons why we use electronic money, compound that with being limited in your banking options. Like, that's why Bitcoin matters, is because it is electronic peer-to-peer cash system. Like, it's everything that you need to run a business. Yeah, I'm not saying that very eloquently, but I think you get the gist.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. And one other kind of last thing here that I wanted to ask, in terms of I mean, you all are a Bitcoin family at this point, but in terms of your normie friends, in terms of friends that, you kind of meet out and about, or other women, what are some of the things that you either have heard or still hear that are holding up people about Bitcoin? Or, because again, I try to keep in mind, this is my personal thing. Other people like Jason Mayer, I've mentioned, other people still use the term orange pilling, and I totally get it. Even with some of my friends, I try to check myself on, like, does that sound like a weird cultish word? Am I making sense? Like, when I'm talking to people, like, what are you talking about? Whatever. And I don't want people to stress too much about that, but what are some ways that you kind of try to talk to about them? And what are some hesitation that you still experience with those friends or women in your life that you're like, I really want them to know about Bitcoin because it's like so great and so good and can help them today? How do I approach this with them?
Yeah, so I've actually never even seen The Matrix. So the word orange pilling does sound cultish. It did sound cultish to me when I first heard it.
You haven't seen The Matrix?
No, I don't care to see
You
it.
can be like, no, I have no interest in seeing it. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
I mean, someone eventually explained it to me, like what that means, the orange pill situation, but I was just like, no, I don't.
That's really funny.
That's not helpful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the inflation conversation is one of the easiest, most clear-cut ways to explain why I'm interested in Bitcoin to just, one of my real life friends. And I think over the last 3 years, a lot of my like IRL friends who I had been friends with for a long time understand what Bitcoin is and actually do hold it or, have some type of exposure to it at this point, which is cool to see. But I think a lot of women or a lot of just my friends, um, I think their lives are so incredibly busy right now that they don't have time to just like study it. Like they're not going to dedicate an hour a day when they have 3 kids, a job, a house to manage. Like, especially in the summer when school's out, it's insane. It's really hard to find extra time to study something that you don't have to study. And so I think just even having exposure to it on a small level is really important. And then I'm always talking about, oh, we have this Bitcoin conference, or oh, there's this new book I just read, you should read it, or like this little excerpt. And I'll just send it to them and have a conversation about it, because I think a lot of people understand, like, okay, inflation's bad. And Becca talks about Bitcoin a lot. So like any little snippet of just a real life conversation, I obviously love talking about it. And I think that they kind of get it a little bit at a time. And so, and I do post about it. I'm sure I annoy a ton of people, but I just keep posting about it. And on Instagram, especially because women are more on Instagram, the X Twitter world is just horrible. I don't really like it, although I do post on there a lot because that's where, Bitcoin Twitter is.
Yeah,
but
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Instagram or, other like more female centric social platforms is a fun way to interact with people who I don't get to see very often, but who are interested and care to talk about it. But it was really cool the other day. I was having a conversation with a neighbor across the street and talking about her work and talking about the book and stuff. And she was like, oh, that's so crazy. My sister-in-law is really into Bitcoin. She loves it. And it was the first time that I had just like met someone who was like, oh yeah, I know all about that. So
that's very cool.
It's spreading, it's becoming less of a weird topic for sure.
Did you have to talk yourself down and be like, okay, don't freak them out by like jumping in and being like, oh my gosh,
like,
yes,
send me her number
let's
right
talk.
now.
Do you have an hour? Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Becca. Well, what can people, what's a little bit more that people can expect from the book? What is the best way to get the book? As we're recording on July 10th today, that I'll put in the show notes, but a couple of weeks from now, this episode will be out. So, where can people get the book?
Yeah. So they can get it on Amazon on July 21st. We have a paperback option or an ebook option. And what you can expect is it is very introductory level, all things Bitcoin. So there's 21 chapters, there's 21 topics to learn about. It spans from history of money to how you can transact with the Lightning Network or have cold storage. So it is the gamut, but it is introductory level. In the book, I have a lot of resources available too. So like different books I've read that have really helped me understand different topics, things like that. And then each chapter has a bio from a woman who works in the space. And so if nothing else, just read those because they're really inspiring and it was a lot of fun to just get to know them. And so I would recommend looking at the bios and then going and following the women on socials and kind of just learning more about what they do. And if there's one in particular that you relate to, follow up with them, send them a message or contact them and let them know. So yeah, I will be in Nashville.
Cool.
We're going to do a book signing. I'm not sure the exact date and time, but I would love to meet anyone in person who wants to come out. And some of the contributors will be there as well. So that's kind of cool.
That's awesome. That's super exciting. I have one last question for you. I've never done this before, but I'll ask if you could finish this sentence. Okay. So Bitcoin is for?
I would say it's for everyone. Because I think a lot of people don't think that it really is, but it actually is.
Yeah. So. Very cool. Well, Becca, thank you so much for taking the time, having this conversation. It was super fun. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it. And for folks listening, if you have people in your life that you think are other women in your life that you're like, this is okay, let me try to talk to my other female friends or family or whatever. think Becca's a great resource and example. I'm sure, Becca, you'd love for people to reach out as well. I'll put it in the show notes as well, but what are some good ways for folks to get in touch if they just want to learn more, or they're another woman that's looking to contribute in the space, or go to a conference, these different things?
Yeah, I think Instagram or Twitter is a great way to contact me. I'm also on LinkedIn if you prefer that. And in person, I'm at a lot of different meetups. And I will be in Nashville, like I said. So if you're there or if you're in the area, please come by and say hi. It would just be a really fun way to get to know more women in the space.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Becca. Again, and everyone, please purchase either the audio or the physical copy of 21 Women in Bitcoin. That'll be out at the point that I just double checked. It'll be out at the point this episode is out. So you'll be able to order it right now, share with family and friends, and for yourself. And thanks again, Becca, so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trey.